In order to start off this Wednesday, I will play everyone a brand new MicroSong.
Yes.
A brand new MicroSong.
We talked to Mike Rowe about these.
This is fresh off the press. This is coming to you from the streets. This one's called Hooker on the Corner. And this is me getting back to my roots of being on the streets, letting people know what it's like out there. So here it is.
On the corner, no one's gonna warn her about the dangers on the street, the people she may meet, the drugs you gotta do, eating fast food. Hooker on the corner, no one's gonna warn her.
There you go. Hooker on the corner.
I have a question about some of the content of that.
Sure.
Is the eating fast food a positive or a negative to that lifestyle?
Well, I mean, I am warning the hookers on the corners about the dangers, not only on the street, but the people she may meet, the drugs you got to do, and eating fast food. And if you eat a lot of fast food every day, as we learned from Super Size Me, can be very detrimental to your health, and you won't keep your slim prostitute body that people know and love. So you got to be careful.
Prostitute body.
Yeah, you got to be careful. So just, it's a warning.
Banging hooker body.
It's a warning. So this is me going back to the streets, letting people know what it's like. And
so you wrote this as a public service announcement.
Pretty much, yeah.
You're kind of warning people, if you have to resort to becoming a hooker on the corner, these are the sorts of things you get to look forward to, and it's not great.
These are tips and tricks for people out there, and it's just my kind of like gangster kind of attitude with the MicroSong. So I hope everyone enjoyed it. You can listen to it again at the end of the program. Now I will be dipping into some different topics, please. I'm going to be talking about David Icke, the Saturn reality matrix, and the nature of this reality. There's not going to be a lot of visuals. I have pulled a lot of clips. And now, I don't know how many people out there have actually read a David Icke book. His books are tremendously long, over 800 pages, very dense. I personally, I can say that I have never read a David Icke book. I've seen sporadic talks from him, mostly when he's doing interviews. Gretchen, have you read anything by him or listened to any of his talks?
I've listened to a lot of his talks. I have not read any of his material, but now, actually, as we're talking, I'm searching around to see which ones I should start on.
Well, one of his theories is that the planet Saturn heavily influences our reality, and that a lot of the elites here on this planet Earth, they worship Saturn. And Saturn, Satan, he seems to use those two words interchangeably, and he contends that Saturn is just another word for Satan, and that Saturn has a very special influence not only over us, but that it is the origin of a reality overlay. He calls it like a virtual reality, and it is critically important to what we experience here on Earth. So I'm going to play a few clips here. This is the first one that kind of goes into Saturn and some of the weird sounds that Saturn produces. Here we go.
Remember, physicists have said only this last few days they may have evidence the universe is a computer simulation. Well, I say that it's a virtual reality which has been hacked into, and that hack is the reality that we're experiencing, the fake reality. And that hack, I say, comes from Saturn. Because I'm saying that these rings are actually a massive broadcast transmission system which is broadcasting a fake reality within the frequency range that we are decoding, and therefore we are picking up that fake reality. When the Cassini spacecraft arrived at Saturn in 2004, found many things that was unexplainable. You know, things like the hexagon North Pole storm and stuff like that. But they also found extraordinarily powerful sound coming from Saturn. This is part of what they recorded. Nice, man.
Pretty creepy stuff. The thing that he referenced there is the hexagonal shape on Saturn, which you do have up on screen there. Pretty curious geometric pattern that is on, I believe, the North Pole of Saturn. Now, science explains this, I think, as some sort of natural formation due to the electromagnetic poles of Saturn. David Icke saying there's something deeper there, that it's not just the formation through electromagnetism, that it is through sound, through vibration that is being broadcasted from Saturn, specifically the rings, and that there are various intelligent entities that control that area of Saturn and use it as basically a broadcast command center to spew out a frequency that is overlaid on top of our reality. So the reality we're experiencing now is heavily influenced by what Saturn is broadcasting. And this next little clip here speaks to that.
The Saturn matrix, as I call it, is a frequency band which we are decoding as a fake reality. And I suggest, my view, we will find that the edge of that frequency band is what we call the speed of light. And beyond it, you go out of the matrix. And when all the genetic tinkering that the ancients talked about went on, the human form was being manipulated to be tuned in to receive and transmit within the frequency band of this Saturn broadcast, and pulling people from a heart state beyond the matrix into a emotional point of interaction massively in the matrix was a major way of tuning us into this fake reality. We talk about people who don't think for themselves as being in the box. Maybe we ought to say that they're in the cube.
And he contends that this reality matrix that we're in is one of constant struggle, fear, strife, that the energy that we put into this matrix is then in turn fed off of by the entities that are overlaying this reality in front of us. It is this cycle of emotion that is then drained from us, and we only respond to what is presented to us, and a lot of us respond very emotionally, and that can be taken advantage of. Now, in this next spot here, this next clip, he goes into the importance of the moon, our moon here, in relation to Saturn and the signal.
And it's my view, as I've said before in previous books, that what the moon is doing, in its present use anyway, is taking this Saturn broadcast and acting as an amplifier to fire it at the Earth, so we get it in massively increased power and therefore effect. It's acting a bit like a dish transmitting information which we're picking up and decoding into a fake reality.
So the moon, our moon that we know and love, is basically an amplification station for this signal from Saturn. Now, there's been a lot of weird things that have been discovered on the moon, whether it's been by the astronauts that have touched down there or by people just with powerful telescopes that can see various structures on the moon. Now, one of the weird things that has happened since our visit to the moon, and I do believe we have gone, I just believe that the information has been curated. The story in which the moon voyages have been told to us have been constructed. There's been B-roll. It's been edited to create a very finely tuned narrative that we all can buy into. It's even been admitted by one of the astronauts that they had a back channel, like they had a public communication that NASA and the world could hear, but then the astronauts also had a back channel where they could communicate directly to NASA that was not public. Initially, NASA completely denied that back channel ever existed, but in one of the astronauts' book, he did admit that they did use that channel quite frequently, and so a lot of goofy things about the Apollo program and Mercury program. I do believe we went to the moon, and I do think that there are interesting structures there. There's a whistleblower called Sergeant Wolf. He was brought in to do some photographic analysis of some of the mosaics that they were trying to create of the lunar surface. He was brought in to the NSA. The NSA was doing some image processing, and during this image processing, in his talks with one of the other engineers there, they were discussing weird satellite dishes in structures on the moon. And this is the whistleblower talking about what he saw.
In the early 2000s, a whistleblower named Carl Wolf came out with a shocking story about something that happened to him in the late 60s. Wolf claimed to have worked for the United States Air Force as a photography technician.
And at the time, I didn't know what the real purpose of this darkroom and this operation and this facility was. I thought this was where they were bringing the data in and then releasing the images to the public. I had no idea that there were other issues involved in this facility. So he starts telling me all of this information, and I knew that what we were doing was classified anyway, and that he could only share a certain level of what he was doing with me because of the compartmentalized nature of our jobs. At any rate, he told me how everything worked. He showed me the equipment where the digital information came in, where it was converted to photographic images. They were doing 35 millimeter strips of film at that time, which were then assembled into 18.5 by 11 inch mosaics, they were called. There was a digital signature and a grayscale on every 35 millimeter strip. And those strips were from successive passes around the moon. And they would take and build up a photograph. They would scan one section of the moon, then another and another, and then they would get a larger image. So this mosaic then would be put in that contact printer, and that was then a print that was issued to whomever, the press, the scientist, whatever, wherever that was intended to go. So he was showing me how all this worked, and we walked over to one side of the lab, and he said, by the way, we've discovered a base on the back side of the moon. And I said, whose? What do you mean, whose? He said, yes, we've discovered a base on the back side of the moon. And at that point, I became frightened, and I was a little terrified, thinking to myself that if anybody walks in the room now, I know we're in jeopardy, we're in trouble, because he shouldn't be giving me this information. I was fascinated by it, but I also knew that he was overstepping a boundary that he shouldn't be stepping over. And then he pulled out one of these mosaics and showed this base, which had geometric shapes. There were towers, there were spherical buildings, there were very tall towers, and things that looked somewhat like radar dishes, but they were large structures. So it was rare that someone would do something like this, but this fellow and I were the same rank. I think he was very distressed. He had the same pallor and demeanor as the scientists outside the room. They were just as concerned as he was, and he needed to discuss it with somebody. So that was the end of it right there. I didn't take it any further than that. I just filed it away. But the interesting thing, every day that I went home, I would think to myself, I can't wait to hear about this on the news, And, so I'd turn on the TV and I'd look at the news to see if they're going to announce we've discovered a base on the backside of the moon, being really naive, And of course, here it is 30 some years later, and we still haven't heard about it.
Yeah, right.
So what if maybe David Icke is correct, that the moon is operational and it is some sort of rebroadcast station, and that the reality we're experiencing is a limited version, and that the real reality is full of interesting symbols and geometry, or just looks and functions a little bit differently than what we're experiencing here. That there is some sort of overlay process. The moon is critical in the rebroadcast, or at least the overlay of our reality. And our visit to the moon, we just kind of stumbled into something. It's currently occupied. It's in use. And we went knocking on a bathroom door that was already occupied. And we haven't gone back there because that bathroom is still occupied. So we're just waiting for them to leave. But they don't want to leave because they're busy doing stuff in there. Now, David Icke goes on. That wasn't David Icke. That was Carl Wolf, the whistleblower. But David Icke did go on his presentation, and he brought up a channeled information. There's a woman who wrote a book that was all channeled, and this is what she had to say about the nature of the moon.
And this was a channeled book, and this is what was in the book. 1996, I think this came out. The moon is a very powerful electromagnetic computer. The energy from the moon has been beaming electromagnetic frequencies onto the Earth for eons now to maintain the two-stranded DNA. The moon is a satellite that was constructed. It was anchored outside Earth's atmosphere as a mediating and monitoring device, a supercomputer or eye in the sky. Earth must be owned by those who dwell there. However, it is not. You have outside gods, creator energies, who prevent you as a species from having free reign with your kundalini. That's the energy of awakening, in effect. The influence of the moon as a main satellite computer affects all of the Earth. The moon's programs have for eons been of great limitation towards human beings. There are repetitive cycles that the moon creates to which you respond. The tales about the full moon and insanity, madness and heightened bleeding are all quite true. You know that television influences you a great deal. The moon is the same way.
So there we go. We're ruled by the moon, and according to David Icke, signals from Saturn as well. And there's an overlay of this reality that we just can't see the true reality. Well, some people contend that you can get a sense of the true reality, or at least poke through and see different aspects of it using DMT, LSD, mushrooms, psychedelics in general. And you can use those things to get a different sense of what may be going on. Well, these next two clips I'm going to play here, this is a guy that did some old acid, some acid he found laying around in a shoebox or something, and I think he combined it with some mushrooms. And he had an incredible trip where he encountered some entities, and they started to explain the nature of reality. So here's part one.
This is one of the most insane trips of my life. Quick disclaimer, do not do this. As I'm going to share in this video, combining these psychedelics can have serious consequences. So this happened quite a while ago, and I combined 1 week tab of acid with 1 to 2 grams of shrooms. And I'd done this once before, so I thought I knew what to expect, but for whatever reason, this trip was on another level. So right from the beginning, my inner voice begins to disassociate from me, which basically means it sounded like it was somebody else talking to me. So I'm sitting on the roof and I'm staring at a single point doing open-eyed meditation, and I start to get deeper and deeper when suddenly I'm just blinded by this flash of white light. As my eyes are adjusting and I see inside this light, I notice that there are entities looking back at me, smiling. I recognize them as the same entities I'd met on my DMT breakthrough, and they're actually very common entities to meet on psychedelics. They're called the Machine Elves. Most of the time, they don't actually look anything like their name. In this case, they were human-shaped beings made of light. They began to communicate with me, and this next part's pretty full on, so keep in mind I'm not saying what they told me is real or not. I'm just telling you what happened. They asked me if they can possess me, and as soon as I say yes, I get this feeling of something just moving about in the back of my mind. My inner voice then mind spoke, but it felt like the machine elves were actually talking to me through my inner voice. It told me the third dimension is held together by focus, and said that if I let go of my focus, I'll leave the third dimension. So at this stage, I begun doing the open-eyed meditation again, so I'm staring forward at a single point, and somehow I do manage to just like lose focus, which is hard to explain, but it's kind of like I look at a place between my vision. I can feel things are getting more and more intense, and because I'm sitting on the roof of my house, I can see all my neighbors' houses in my periphery, and all of a sudden they just turn into these like random shapes. They then lift off the ground and start circling, and then literally just get sucked into the middle of my vision, spat out as like all these random spirals and shapes. Like, it was getting intense. I'm not exactly sure what happened after that, but the next thing I do remember is I'm in a completely new reality, surrounded by the machine elves, and I've actually become one of them now. They then start telling me what happens after we die, but this video has been long enough already, so I'll save that for part 2.
So I'll play part 2 here. So this guy...
I say there better be a freaking part 2 after that.
Yeah. So this guy just stumbled into this machine elf reality. But it looked like the overlay, if we're going with the David Icke theory, that the overlay of the reality from Saturn and the moon kind of drifted away because he was doing psychedelics and using meditation. He was able to see a different reality and kind of step into the trickster realm. Some people equate the machine elves to being tricksters. And other people, there are other astronomers out there that counter David Icke and say, well, the elites really aren't worshiping Saturn. They're actually worshiping Venus. So I just want to throw that out there. I think it's immaterial for this. We're basically focused on an overlay of reality and that we're trapped in this cycle of suffering and emotional vampirism. So in part 2 here, this guy will go into the nature of death and more about what the machine elves have to offer when it comes to information.
They told me what happens after we die. There was quite a lot to this, but basically what they said was that when I die, I would enter the reality that I was in at that point. I would then become one of the machine elves, and I would travel back through my memories and watch my entire life. Now that is a super simplified version because it was very complicated, and there was like other stuff as well. I remember they said that memories themselves were like this wormhole technology that allowed them to access different moments in time. They were just sharing lots of insane, weird sounding information like that. I should say though that after they were done communicating, I did feel like there was no reason to fear death at all, and I was definitely left with this like really positive feeling. Anyway, I leave the machine elf reality, come back into my body, and I realized that somehow I've gotten off the roof and I'm literally about to enter my room again, even though I'd been completely out of my body up until that moment. I'm losing control of myself fast, and so I just go inside, sit down, and do whatever I can to relax. But I begin to remember my DMT breakthrough, where I'd met the machine elves before. I'm able to remember them vividly, and all of a sudden, it's like they jump out of my memory and like possess me all over again. I start saying out loud what they told me on DMT, and I literally can't stop myself. I say, as these machine elves, we control everything. We are you, we are your neighbors, we are everything you perceive, and we are you perceiving it. We control everything. And that was basically it. After I'd said that, I felt them leave, and, a few other stuff happened, but that was basically the end of, like, the major trippy stuff.
So essentially what I got out of that, the machine elves said that when you die, you get a life review. You get a chance to review all your memories. Now, I didn't get into reincarnation there, or the reincarnation trap, or getting into if you did something wrong in this lifetime, you gotta go back to and you gotta get your soul recycled and go back and do it again. But they said use wormhole technology. Like your memories, our memories are wormhole technology. Now, what I got out of that is that, at least for me, a lot of my memories are attached to some pretty significant emotions, and that the machine elves may be using that, not only the image of the memory, but also the emotion as the cross-reference. And what David Icke is saying earlier is that this fictional reality that we're living in, this matrix, is one of turmoil, emotion, and creates memories in which these entities can then use for jumping off points. Like they exist everywhere at once. But if they just had images of memories, it's not very useful. The images with emotion creates an XY axis, and they have a destination. They know where they're going then. So that's critical for them. Now, in these final two clips here, it's a friend of the show, who I'd like to call a friend of the show, is Howdy Medeski. And
you mean Howdy Mikowski?
Mikowski, yes. He's such a good friend that I bungled his name, Cratchit.
We're on a first name basis. Don't even care about the second name.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, Howdy does good stuff. I like his channel.
I like him too. I like how he
and his books.
Yes, I think he's got some pretty interesting ideas and thoughts. And he was on the Freeman Fly podcast, and Freeman Fly has been around for such a long time at this point. And he was on his show back in mid-October, and they got into the nature of this reality and the reincarnation trap, as Howdy assumes it to be. But in this clip here, Howdy is talking about, does he try to change the world around him? Does he try to change other people's opinion about the world, or get involved with trying to convince somebody? But here's him talking about that.
Oh, yeah, the world is bad, it's crazy, and I need to fix it. Right. I need to change it. I need to make it better. So all of a sudden, that energy is being thrown back out into the world without really understanding what the world is. I mean, if this reality is only set up as a harvesting energy source, if it's set up as a realm of suffering, if that's really what it is, and this is something everyone needs to honestly ask themselves and look into. Don't trust me or believe me. Find out the answer for yourself one way or another. But don't start, in my opinion, don't start throwing out a bunch of energy trying to fix a world that you don't know might not be able to be fixed. If the whole thing is set up to be just suffering and energy stealing, then to throw all your energy trying to change it will do absolutely nothing.
You're throwing your soul into a meat grinder. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, you're just throwing more energy into the system. You're actually making it worse. The difference would be like, okay, then how do I extract myself from the entire system? I don't need to change it. The system can do what it wants.
And that's kind of where I'm at. Like, I'm done trying to convince people of certain things, and I'm here to, at this point, have fun, maybe passively change some minds here and there, have some interesting conversations. But it does feel like when you get into discussions, and I know Joe's experienced this. We've all experienced this, that it does feel like when you're in a conversation with somebody and you're coming from two different points of view, you're beating your head against the wall trying to convince somebody, but that there is, in fact, an Epstein Island, or there is, in fact, some sort of weirdness going on behind the scenes, and that there's much more to this reality than what is given to us on the 6 o'clock news. There really doesn't seem like a point to try to convince anybody anymore. Everyone has to come to their own conclusions at this point, and I think that's what Howdy is speaking to there. It's wasted energy, and you're expending all this energy. It's creating a lot of aggravation, frustration within yourself, and that's just feeding this matrix that we're in, and that is in part the design of the matrix, to frustrate you, create an over-emotional state that then it can be fed off of. Now, in this last clip here, Howdy goes into the escaping the matrix. I remember we asked him about this on the show, Cretched. He said there's a doorway, and we asked him, like, well, how do you get out of this? Like, if this is a constructed reality, how the heck do you get out of here? Well, he goes into it right here. And here's how you escape the matrix.
You know, that's what these archons feed on, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and that's why I talked about the recapitulation as well in my book. It's the importance of really going through your life to know it really, really well. So you're not holding that regret. You're not holding the guilt. You're not holding the shame. You've seen things honestly. You've seen yourself honestly. You've seen how difficult things have transformed you. You've seen how you've grown. But there's all of those, like you say, that sucking, terrible, heavy energy is not there, because they're gonna try to throw a life review at you after you die. And if you're not fully unknowing of your life, then there's going to be surprises and there's going to be tricks, and they're going to try to play the guilt game on you. And like you say, if you can be in a place where you can say, I'm okay with my life, I'm okay with how I lived, I'm okay with what I done. Yeah, I would have done a few things differently, but that's how it turned out. I've learned from it. I think you're then you're in a great starting point, because that guilt and shame is one of the number one hooks to being tricked to coming back here.
That's how you do it. That's how you get out, is that you got to be okay with the life decisions that you've made. So basically, self-reflection, a little bit of self-therapy, being okay with some of the grief and maybe pain you've caused friends, loved ones, even strangers, like getting okay with yourself. Because in that, he said during the life review, you can call machine elves, but they're going to use that your memories and that emotion to get at you, to get you back into this matrix. Now, at the beginning there, they said, Freeman said, that's what the archons feed on. And archons, at least in like Gnosticism, they're considered like the builders of the physical universe, and that they hover around and hang around to feed upon the negative aspects of people's emotions. There's a couple different views of archons, but in this context, Freeman is referencing archons in a negative way. Like they are sucking off of your emotions. And so they have a vested interest in keeping people kind of like in an emotional state so they can feed off of you. But there it is. There is the nature of reality, the holographic overlay, a little bit of Ike, a little bit of DMT, a little bit of machine elves, and a little bit of self-therapy. And that's all you need to get through this life, people. We're good after that.
Because the question is, are the archons leveraging that energy to power reality, or is it just for their own uses?
I would say through some of Ike's talks, yes. That the emotional energy does power this reality, so it's almost like a feedback loop. So I guess the more people you get to watch the news or to look at the most controversial latest thing, the more energy that is expelled, and it solidifies that reality a little bit more. And that's why I think people's personal beliefs, very powerful. The power of thought and intention, very powerful, as quantum theory suggests, that we do have an influence over our reality just by looking at it and setting some intentions. Not like the Force with magic, but thinking positively and even suggesting that you will do some certain things can influence the future. So that's
this general concept of the Gnostic archons fascinates me. I'm kind of reading up on it.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting stuff.
Give us an email at ourbigdumbmouth@gmail.com. Check out obdmpod.com for all the social media and donation links.